Welcome to this training, how to understand and overcome self-sabotage. My name is Lorraine Hamilton and I'm so happy that you're joining me to learn more about what could potentially be holding you back from living that bold, authentic, technicolor life that I know you deserve. We're going live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube right now. So if you are watching live, then let me know, and let me know what platform you're watching on and whereabouts in the world you are. And I will try and keep a handle on comments. There's lots going on behind the scenes. So yeah, it'd be great to have your engagement in this session. And you can still play if you're watching the replay. So let me know where you're watching from. Now, before we get started into today's content and dive into all things self-sabotage, I want to make sure that you are aware that you have all of the information that you need about the Purple Hair Revolution, which is my 12-week coaching program that dives deep into the patterns that keep us stuck. So early bird discounts close tonight. So please go ahead and open a tab with this link so that you can review everything that's included before the deadline. Great to have you with us, Penny, and I can see someone else watching from LinkedIn, but I'm not sure who you are, so please let me know who you are if you're watching from LinkedIn in Wellington. So yes, open a tab with this link so that you can come back to it and have a look at everything that is included in the Purple Hair Revolution. We've already had some amazing people join us and I am really excited to get started. So make sure that you get your discount and inclusions today. All right, so why learn from me? Well, I've had more than 15 years experience in the personal development industry. I'm globally accredited by the International Coaching Federation as a coach and a trainer. And the International Coaching Federation really is the gold standard in coaching. I've also got more than 10,000 hours under my belt of client experience, plus training in a whole host of approaches and modalities. For over a decade, I've been the coach that other coaches seek out to upskill, including some that you may have heard of. And I am proudly the program director at Coaching Evolved, where we really are changing the paradigm of coaching and the coaching industry. And before all that, I was an engineer and brought a coaching approach to my engineering work, which was hugely successful, and very flattered to have been featured in countless media outlets and podcasts. Including tomorrow, I will be live again with Dr. Caroline Brookfield on her Creative Lifescaping podcast on LinkedIn. So it will be streamed live from my LinkedIn profile, so you can catch me on that as well. Okay, so we're here to talk about self-sabotage. So feel free to drop your ideas of what is self-sabotage in the comments of the platform that you are watching on. And even if you are on the replay or whether you're live, it doesn't matter, but drop your comments in. What is self-sabotage? What does the term self-sabotage mean to you? Because self-sabotage is a term that my clients are pretty familiar with. They can see themselves doing it. And it can look like lots of different behaviors. You know, all these things that can leave you feeling a bit like this, you know. Hey, Vika, lovely to see you. You know, maybe it's cheating on your healthy eating plan, or finding ways to dodge taking regular exercise. even though you know that health and fitness is a goal for you. Or maybe it is not following up on those clients for your business because you're afraid that you're going to scare them away if you keep following them up. Hey, Ali. It could be that it's not sharing your opinions and ideas in meetings, but desperately wanting to progress your career. Or maybe it's picking an argument with your partner. Whatever it is, on the one hand, we're really clear about what it is that we want, but on the other, we seem to just keep on getting in our own way. Does that sound familiar to you? And I see we've got some comments. So spending time on the wrong things. Yeah, spending time on the wrong things is a great pattern of self-sabotage. We have stopping yourself from doing something you should and could, but not doing it. And we'll definitely talk about that later on. And putting yourself down. Yeah. All of these things, it's like, on the one hand, it seems like logically you know what it is that you need to do, and then something else happens. So I have a definition of self-sabotage, and my definition of self-sabotage is doing things that don't make sense. It really is as simple as that. It's like it's doing things that don't make sense. But when we're not getting the results that we really, really want, it's time to look a little bit deeper. And that's what today's session is all about. So I hope you're in the right place, because I'm excited to share some of this with you. So for a long time, we thought that all of the messages that originated in our brains, and that was what drove everything. It was all brain related, and it made a lot of sense to think of it this way. And it was very useful for a long time to think about the brain as these three layers, and I think it is still useful. So I want to introduce you to these three layers. I have done quite a bit of work in this space, but I still like to simplify things and distill them down to the most simple ways that I can, to make them make sense to me. So I hope it helps make sense for you too. So looking at this image and the three layers that we've got there, working from outside in, and that's one thing to be aware of, is that the way that our brains have developed, both developmentally and in an evolutionary sense, it's kind of from inside out. So the neocortex, that outside layer, is the newest part of our brain. It's the last piece to develop when we're growing up. And it's also the newest part that has developed from an evolutionary perspective. And this is kind of what we consider our conscious mind. It's in charge of our thinking. It's where those to-do lists live. Then the next layer in is our limbic system, and that forms part of our subconscious. We're partly aware of our feelings and memories and emotions, and that's all wrapped up in that part of our brain. But deep within that subconscious mind is what we refer to as our primal brain, that instinctive brain. And that's what's really responsible for making sure all of those things that we don't need to think about function, like our heart beating and pumping blood through our bodies. When you get cold, goosebumps and your hair standing on end, sweating when we get too hot, all of those functions are really taken care of, or are certainly connected to this primal instinctive part of our brain. And it's actually this part that is still running the show in a lot of cases. So you might think that you want that goal or that vision that you've got in mind, and you might have a really clear picture of what that looks like. And it feels really good as well. You're like, yeah, this is going to be amazing when I get there. But if you can't get to it safely, then you're going to find yourself in a pattern of self-sabotage. So we're going to talk about safety a lot in today's session, but this idea and principle is also being supported by the newest research into the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that runs all the way from the back of your throat, the bottom of your tongue, all the way down through your body. And what that's shown is that approximately 80% of information is not flowing from brain to body, but actually from body to brain. And so the body, in particular, your gut, is communicating to the primal brain way more than the neocortex, the thinking part of our brain, is communicating to our body. And this is really important. And it's also coined a new term, and that term being neuroception. Our autonomic nervous system is taking in and acting on information without involving the thinking parts of the brain. Okay, so neuroception is our autonomic nervous system taking in, acting on information without involving the thinking parts of the brain. So that's really important when it comes to self-sabotage, because a lot of that self-sabotage, when we're doing it, we're like, why am I doing this? It's because we're thinking about it. But this is happening without us having to think. Hi, Andrea. Welcome. Thanks for letting me know that you are here and joining us. So neuroception answers the question, in this moment, am I safe or am I in danger? And your autonomic nervous system moves into the state that brings the energy that you need to manage whatever that situation is effectively. So I love this version of what I'm talking about and what it looks like, the autonomic ladder. Because when we experience a neuroception of safety, then we're social, we're engaged, and we're connected. And when we experience a neuroception of danger, that's when we're likely to experience that fight or flight instinct, and our sympathetic nervous system is activated. And when we experience a neuroception of life threat, we essentially shut down and withdraw, and our parasympathetic nervous system is activated. So thinking of animals that play dead when they're under threat, that's essentially what a neuroception of life threat is doing. But not all of our neuroception responses are really extreme. So let's take a look at what fight, flight, freeze looks like to most of us in our day-to-day life, so that we can see it and recognize it. Because fight doesn't need to be squaring up to a predator or an enemy. It can be much more subtle than that. It can be being defensive or irritable or angry. And those behaviors can indicate that something may have triggered your fight response, and you're now in a sympathetic response pattern. And flight can look a lot like avoidance or procrastination, like we were talking about in the comments earlier. You know, that sense of knowing that you need to do something but not doing it and doing something else instead, avoidance. It can also look a lot like perfectionism. So if we've got any perfectionists in the house, then say hi, I see you. Because perfectionism can be a fear of being judged, and it causes that flight response. And freeze gives us that sense of detachment or giving up on things because they can feel hard, or we might feel unsupported. So fight, flight, freeze is often presented with this idea of, living in ancient times and having to fight predators or being at war, but it doesn't look like that in modern day. Our modern day stresses can look a lot more subtle, but at a deep, deep level, we're still having very debilitating responses. So why does it happen? Well, it is because of the way that we're hardwired since those primal days. We are still very much ancient beings, but we just have these extra layers of evolutionary development. And that's causing us to get in our own way. Because as humans, we're hardwired for connection and belonging, because it was absolutely necessary for our survival. So if you didn't have belonging, if you didn't belong, then you could be cast out of the tribe, and there was a real danger there that you wouldn't survive. It was the worst thing that could happen to you because there's safety in numbers. So when we're born, we're entirely reliant on others to know what to do and what to believe and how to behave. We're born, and then we kind of need to have our operating system installed so that we know how to behave in order to stay safe. So we grow up believing that we need to be a certain way, that there are certain expectations of us as children, employees, parents, siblings, friends. And it can be really scary to challenge those expectations in order to get more of what we want for ourselves as individuals. And so we begin to tell ourselves stories to keep ourselves the same. And we might be aware of those stories, or they could be at a non-conscious level. So we want to keep ourselves the same. We keep getting less of what we want and more of what we don't want instead of the other way around. It's all about fitting in, because to not fit in meant certain death. But that's not the case anymore. But here's how it plays out. So in order for us to make a change, if we want to change our situation, whether it's get a job, start a business, move countries, go for a promotion, have family, it needs us to make a change. And that can mean challenging some of those initial values and beliefs that were given to us, essentially to keep us safe. Our parents and caregivers give us their values in order to keep us safe. But any big change that we want to make is going to draw attention to us and therefore single us out. Now, for a long time, I worked with patients who had had weight loss surgery, and this was really true for them because it was such a visible change that they really stood out, and it would draw attention to them. Because being singled out is not a safe activity to your autonomic nervous system, because of that idea that there's safety in numbers. When you're singled out, that's not safe. And it can trigger your fight, flight, freeze response, which ends up looking exactly like self-sabotage. Is this making sense? So if you are live right now, drop me a note in the comments and let me know if this is starting to make sense, if the dots are connecting. And even if you're watching the replay, then still leave me a note and let me know, is this making sense? Is it lining up? Thanks, Vika. Yeah, great to hear that it is making sense to you. So, in order to avoid self-sabotage, we need to make our goals safe. Whatever our plans are, we need to make them safe. And that's all right in theory, but what about the practical aspects? How do you make your goals safe? Well, we do that by getting our safety instinct that lives in our gut aligned with our heart's passion, so for our values and what we most desire, and then aligning that with our logical brain. Because without having them all on board, we're really leaving ourselves open to self-sabotage. Now, if you've gotten this far with me, then you probably have already realized or are beginning to realize that mindset is not everything. Even though many intellectuals would disagree with me, and if you know me at all, then you know that I used to be an engineer, so I was surrounded by intellectuals for a large part of my life, and many of them did believe that mindset was everything and intellect was everything. But we don't have to look very far to be able to see numerous ancient references to mind, body, and soul, mind, body, and spirit. And now modern science is beginning to catch up with what that ancient wisdom has known for centuries. And that is that mindset is not everything. And what we do in Coaching Evolved is definitely to really start to embody much more of that wisdom. And that's something that I'm bringing to the participants of the Purple Hair Revolution as well. So over the last decade or so, research in the field of neuroscience has uncovered that we have got complex, adaptive, and functional neural networks, or brains, in our heart and gut regions. It's absolutely fascinating research, and I highly encourage you to dive into it. So, called the cardiac and enteric brains, respectively, we have our heart brain and our gut brain. And these neural networks exhibit memory, intelligence, and adaptive processing. So basically, they learn, they change, and they adapt. So to give you an idea of comparison, our head brain has got between 50 and 100 billion neurons. But it's not the only place that has a large concentration of these information messengers, these neurons. Your heart has got between 30,000 and 120,000 neurons, so not to be sneezed at. And your gut has between 200 and 500 million neurons, which is about the same size as a cat's brain, okay, if you want a comparison. So regardless of whether or not you respond to the word using the term brain for these networks or intelligence for these networks or something else completely, we would be remiss if we did not pay attention to the science that is highlighting there is so much more to these neural networks than just pumping blood and digesting our food. So I do encourage you to dive into this a little bit deeper, maybe with me in the Purple Hair Revolution. But how does it fit within the context of making your goals safe? Well, first, let me introduce you to your three brains, which you may not have met before. So first of all, your heart brain. So your heart brain is the seat of your compassion, your emotions, and connection, deep connection with yourself and others. And when your heart brain is in its balanced and coherent state, you can tap into passion, dreams, aspiration, purpose, peace, forgiveness, hope, joy, trust, connection, appreciation, gratitude, compassion for yourself and others, equanimity, emotional security, love, generosity. All of these values live in that heart space. Okay, so when your heart brain is in its balanced and coherent state, that's when you can really tap into all of the joy and juice of these values. Your gut brain, as we've talked about earlier, is all about keeping you safe. It's where the term gut instinct originates, right? It's talking about that deep sense of gut. And every time I talk about it, my hand goes to my belly. You can't see it, but my hand goes to my belly, my hand goes to my heart. Trusting your gut. This is something that we hear often. But to be able to trust it, we must know how to connect to it. Motivation and self-identity are also functions of the gut brain. So if you are creating a vision for yourself or an identity for yourself and your gut is not on board, that can lead to a disconnect and self-sabotage. And your gut is also the seat of mobilization. So if you've identified with any of the self-sabotaging behaviors that are keeping you procrastinating or stuck, then this could be the key to unlocking your results, because motility also comes from that gut space. It's where we take action from, which is possibly something new, because contrary to popular opinion, your head brain is not where you make decisions and take action from. Instead, it's where your creativity lies. Your head brain is amazing at making meaning of the world. It's amazing at coming up with options, pros and cons lists, gathering data. Yeah? That's what your head's here for. It needs support to do the other jobs. And in my experience, I work with more clients who are stuck in their head, trying to get their head to do the job of all three brains rather than just focusing on its own zone of genius. And unraveling that is a lot of the work that I do. It's just, let your head brain go and have a cup of tea and put its feet up because it's got support. So fascinating work. So some signs that your brains might not be aligned. So indicators can be that you're not acting on your dreams, your goals, your plans, or you're doing these self-sabotaging behaviors or habits and it's difficult to stop. Decision-making can be much, much easier when you've got alignment across your head, heart, and gut. If it's difficult to get that motivation or take action, that can also be an indicator that you're out of alignment. And what we're here talking about all in this session entirely is sabotage. So self-sabotage for your goals. Or if you find yourself commonly experiencing frustration, depression, anger, anxiety, there could be something in that for you here that you need to align your head, heart, and gut. And one or other of them is doing the work of more than one. So does anyone see themselves in this misalignment, in any of these misalignment examples? Any of it familiar? So, thank you, Penny, for being so honest and vulnerable. I appreciate that. So, making sure your three brains are aligned is important at any time, but specifically when you're trying to achieve goals, when you're making decisions, when you're trying to solve problems, when you need motivation or you need to take action on something. And then cultivating understanding and perspective in relationships, in personal development, learning, behavioral change, health and well-being. So most of the important stuff, it's important to have your 3 brains or intelligences aligned. So how do you do it? Well, in the Purple Hair Revolution, we work with the 3 brains in a deep way, and I guide participants through some really powerful practices to align your 3 brains and then develop a really strong connection with them so that you can minimize the risk of self-sabotage patterns and behavior in the future. But you can still really benefit from understanding the sequence to aligning your 3 brains here. Okay, so it's important that you get the sequence right. So everything starts with heart. So heart leads with passion. Everything starts with your feelings, with your why. So connecting really deeply to the passion and the why of the goal that you're pursuing, that you desire. And the more reasons, the more powerful. Now, I encourage my clients to come up with at least 50. And if you have a copy of my book, Dye Your Hair Purple Sooner, then you will also have witnessed this, that the why is so important. That's where we start. We start with the emotion because that's a really powerful fuel source for what needs to come next. Then allow brain to design the steps. So then we can move into the logical brain and let it go nuts, let it get creative. That's what it's really good for. Let the creativity run wild with all the options that are available or possible to create a path to that end goal. And let it come up with lots of options. Okay, so get creative and relax into it and know that that is your brain doing what it does best. And then gut needs to ensure that it feels safe. So it ensures movement, safety, and it's the most likely to cause you to shut down if it deems that your pathway is unsafe and you don't have another safe option. So the easiest way to manage this is to break each step that your head brain comes up with, break it down into really bite-sized tasks and chunks. Because remember, when we said that, we saw that the big change would take you through that cycle, taking you to fight, flight, freeze, and self-sabotage. Even if you try and do something that is too big a step, then it can cause you to drop into that cycle. So one of the examples that I often share about this is I create a lot of content. I create a lot of presentations. I create a lot of courses. And there's a lot that goes on and it goes into creating these things. There are multiple steps to creating videos and the slide decks and the content and emails and tech, and there's a lot that goes into it. So each one is quite a big project in and of itself. And if I don't break each piece down into small enough tasks, then what generally happens is that I sit down at my computer and I go to take the next thing on my task list. And if it's too big, what happens is I instantly go, oh, do you know what? I'll just put on a load of washing before I do this. Or, oh, I'll just nip to the post office before I sit down and tackle this, because then I can focus on it completely. But what's really happening, and it sounds totally plausible, it sounds absolutely feasible in my head, but what's actually happening is that it's too big, and my gut is going, this is too big a change. We don't want to change. That could mean that we're going to be singled out. And so therefore, that's not safe. We're going to avoid. And so I have to break everything down into really small bite-sized chunks so that no one task in isolation is running the risk of my safety mechanism kicking in and saving me from what I'm planning to do, because that's essentially what's going on. It's my safety mechanism saving me. So the easiest way to align your three brains, let heart lead, then design the steps, and then break those steps down into very small bite-sized chunks. And the science supports this. Okay. And then if you do find yourself in a pattern of self-sabotage, then here are some questions and prompts that might be helpful for you to ask yourself or journal on, whatever you have got space to do in the moment. So ask yourself, which of my rules are being threatened? So in this pattern of self-sabotage, which of my beliefs are being threatened here? If I do this, what am I running the risk of here? For example, you know, if I'm putting a project together, or even like running one of these lunch and learns, it's inherently risky because I'm putting myself out there publicly, right? So it's inherently very, very scary. So my rules of, you know, not raising your head above the parapet, when you put yourself out there, then people might judge you and call me names or challenge my thinking or just be mean, you know, that's a risk. So which of my rules is being threatened? My rule of it's not safe to stand out. So how can I assure myself that I am, in fact, safe? What does that part of me need in this moment? And how can I give it what it needs? So that part of me might be the 8-year-old me who was picked on mercilessly as a child because I went into the school production and I gave it my all, and everybody else was kind of, you know, being shy and not really, you know, not really singing out to their heart's fullest potential, but I was, and that singled me out. And I learned from that experience that it wasn't safe to do that. And so in that moment, I shut everything down. So what does that version of me need? Well, it needs me to recognize what was going on for the other kids, and I needed some love and compassion and encouragement in that moment. And then, is what I'm afraid of actually a fear, or is it actually a worry that I have no control over? And this introduces this idea of the difference between worry and fear. And if you've ever considered this before, then I'd love your thoughts. And if you haven't, then let me give you this as something to think about. Because I think of worry as an indulgence. Worry is an indulgence. It's sitting and taking time to process things that you can't affect in that moment. So yeah, your brain might be coming up with all of these options, but we're actually allowing that to affect our behavior. So worry is not something that is within our control. Fear is within our control, because fear we can understand. Fear we can learn to live alongside, because fear is not something to be conquered, which is often, I see that kind of language being used a lot in the space that I spend my time. And I don't believe that fear is something that should be conquered. Fear is something that needs to be understood because it has a very pure purpose, which is that of survival. So is it a fear? Is there something that my gut believes is unsafe for me? Because we can address that. Or is this worry and assumptions and presumptions? Because that we don't have control over. And it's a bit of an indulgence to sit and wallow in that worry. So that might be quite confronting for some of you, and do let me know in the chat if what your thoughts are around that. But yeah, these 3 prompts can be really useful when you catch yourself in that self-sabotaging behavior, because it's often easier to see the behavior than it is to catch the thoughts that may or may not be even conscious thoughts because of this concept of neuroception. All right, so we've actually covered quite a lot in the last 40 minutes, so let's review. Self-sabotage is doing things that don't make sense. And as I go through this review, I'd love for you to drop in the chat, whether you are live or whether you're watching the replay, what are the key takeaways for you from this session? These, I'm picking out some of the pertinent points, but you might have something that's completely different. So let me know in the comments, in the chat, what are your takeaways from this session? So self-sabotage is doing things that don't make sense. That's my definition. Neuroception describes the process of checking that we are safe without input from our thinking brain. Okay, so this can happen without us ever being aware of it. We need to make our goals safe from the perspective of our gut safety instinct. And we have 3 brains or intelligences or neural networks to help us. And so our heart leads, head designs, and gut is the one that takes the action. So if you're trying to take action from your head, and then that's endlessly frustrating, right? You're like, why am I not taking action on this? Why do I keep getting in my own way? I need to figure this out. I need to think my way out of this. Then that can cause an even bigger spiral into inaction, because it's not where action comes from. And then 3 questions to ask yourself when you find yourself in self-sabotage. Then we covered those questions. So just a quick reminder of them. Which of my rules are being threatened? How can I assure myself that I am in fact safe? And is what I'm afraid of actually a fear, or is it a worry that I have no control over? Okay. And remember that if you want to dive deeper into this, then I would love to invite you to go and have a look and see what we were going to be exploring and immersing ourselves in the Purple Hair Revolution 12-week coaching program. It starts on the 20th of April. Early bird discounts close tonight. So please do go and have a look and see if it speaks to you. I think that link should take you there. If it doesn't, then https://lorrainehamilton.net/purple hair revolution will take you there. Please have a look. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to see you there. So let me just look over at the chat again. Alison, thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to come back and watch the replay, it should be ready very, very soon, and you can jump on and see what you missed. Ali Nash, thank you for joining me. Penny, thank you for joining me. Vika, Andrea, thank you for being on here live. If you're watching the replay, then do leave comments and I will come back to them for sure. But yeah, any final thoughts, questions about anything that we've covered, any insights or key takeaways, any aha moments, anything that was confronting, I'd love you to leave me a note. And thank you for joining me. All right, and this is it for another Lunch and Learn. Remember, I will be live with Dr. Caroline Brookfield tomorrow on my LinkedIn profile. And yeah, another Lunch and Learn this time next week. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you soon.